Let's go watch it in 2D. No, let's go watch it in 3D. But if we watch it in 3D, then is it worth the cost?
It's time to make some wrong things right. Help me bring supers back into the sunlight. We need to change people's perceptions about superheroes, and Elastigirl is our best play.
Better than me?
Whoa! I like Mom's new job! Bye, sweetie.
I'll watch the kids, no problem.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
This podcast is brought to you by 3D Wiggle. With 3D Wiggle software, you can impress your family and friends with 3D gifts and videos. To find out more information, please click on the link in the description for 20% off coupon as well. This podcast is also brought to you by Patreon. With Patreon, you can become a patron and get this podcast commercial free and get many more benefits. Please click on the description again to get more information. Now, back to the show. Hello. This is Adolf Vega from 3D or 2D.com, and today I'm reviewing The Incredibles, or actually, Incredibles 2. There is no the in the title. Original had a the, but this one doesn't. As always, 3D or 2D.com reviews, I'll talk about the 3D element first. So the best way to explain the 3D element is just to say that it's low-key. That's just the best word, because it just doesn't really... It's largely forgettable, the vast majority of the movie. You know, the character of Elastigirl has many notable scenes that have good pop-out 3D, but it feels muted. It feels like they limited how much pop and how much depth this movie has. Like, you would see scenes where things would pop out, but like just barely. It's like, why limit it? Why not keep going with it? You know, where, you know, the volume on it just seems like it was very small. Like they didn't push it all the way. Like they like, oh, it's pop out a little bit, not all the way. And it's a little frustrating because you see the movie, it doesn't look inherently bad. It's just underused. You know, there's a couple of scenes here and there with depth that were used nicely with portals and long hallways. You know, I did enjoy it, but it's just so few and far between. And, you know, I took off my glasses at one point just to see the difference, and there wasn't that much. You know, yeah, they have 3D models, and it's a 3D environment, but it just doesn't impress. It doesn't. You don't say, wow. It's like, oh, that's kind of there, and that's it. And that's just kind of disappointing. Occasionally, there's actually some darkly lit scenes and some scenes with a strobe visual effect that can disrupt the 3D. And, you know, it can be a little weird. You know, perplexly, it's kind of weird that the end credits show off some of the best use of the 3D. You know, obviously no one cares if the credits are in 3D because they come to watch the movie, not the credits. But I have to kind of say, the credits actually look very stylized themselves and have, you know, very nice 3D effect. Some of the animated scenes in the credits are also used layering in fun ways. It's disappointing that the credits are the best aspect of the 3D element of the movie. Honestly, no one cares. You know, it's a mute point, but it's worth mentioning. You know, the 3D isn't bad. It really isn't. It's just so barely used. Like, you know, they could have really knocked it out of the park, you know, but they chose, let's just be very subtle 3D, just a little bit. And it's just like, why? Why not do more? Why does this have to be so limited? You know, go for the 10 out of 10. Not just settle for, 6 is good enough. Why do we need to pop out more? Why do we need more depth? It was just not used as well, as much as I would want it to be. And you see the scenes and you're like, oh, that would have been better in 3D. And if you actually watch it in 3D, it's like, yeah, it's nicer, but it should pop out more. It should be more, you know, and it just disappointed me. So ultimately, I'm going to have to give this a final verdict of weak 3D, 2D recommended.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
This podcast is brought to you by 3D Wiggle. With 3D Wiggle software, you can impress your family and friends with 3D gifts and videos. To find out more information, please click on the link in the description for 20% off coupon as well. This podcast is also brought to you by Patreon. With Patreon, you can become a patron and get this podcast commercial free and get many more benefits. Please click on the description again to get more information. Now, back to the show. Now, onto the movie itself. People have been wanting a sequel to The Incredibles for over a decade. So this movie really has a lot of expectations, a lot of hype, and a lot of people excited. And is it really worth the long wait? You know, this is a hard movie to review. I'm going to admit this. It's because I was one of those fans. You know, I enjoyed the movie when it came out in 2004, the original, and I wanted more. And, you know, I expected, all right, it's a couple years, and, 14 years later, we finally get it. And, of course, this one makes the most sense to make a sequel. I'm not trying to critique Cars or Toy Story or Finding Dory, but this one really felt like they could be more to this world, more to this, what they introduced in the first one, and they, kind of ignored it until now. So I was kind of excited to see this movie and hoping that it would be great. And unfortunately, this movie just feels very dependent on the original, and in many ways serves as the fourth, fifth, and sixth acts of the original movie. If you haven't seen the first movie, I think you're going to be lost going into this second one. And in some ways, this movie feels like a rehash of the original, but only serves as a continuation of the story and never really feels like its own thing. And that's disappointing. I try to keep an open mind and not judge it based on how it should be or how I want it to be. I try to not to allow hype to, get into me, but I feel like this movie just is there, but doesn't wow me. There's nothing there that I haven't seen before. And it's just more of the same, which isn't inherently bad. I love the first one, but at the same time, you can't, use the same trick twice. And they try to. So The Incredibles, this movie, like I said before, is directly attached to the first one. The Incredibles originally ended in a cheeky cliffhanger with the second movie actually starting where the first movie ended. And this is interesting because the first movie ended and there was like this mole guy coming out of the ground and, everyone's getting ready to go fight it. And it kind of cuts off. And some people thought this was how the sequel would continue. I always thought that it was just a wink and nod to the fans. It said, hey, more adventures are going to come. You may not see them on screen, but, they have more adventures. And it's a fun little way to just keep going with the idea. It's not, never assumed it was actually going to be the beginning of this movie. Where basically you start off from. You follow Elastigirl for the majority of this movie. And she is part of like a mission to stop a new villain, and the new villain is called the Screenslaver, and he's terrorizing the city, and Elastigirl is on a mission to stop him. And the action scenes are well done. It's choreographed in a fun way to watch. You get a secondary plot with Mr. Incredible staying at home, taking care of the family, and many scenes reference the predecessors, many sequels. And many scenes in this movie reference to the original, and it really feels like a carbon copy of the original. I'm sorry, it's the same movie, just twisted around. Where the first movie was about Mr. Incredible going out for, adventures, this is Mrs. Incredible going out for adventures. And the villain is, the first one I thought was great, and this one I thought was very weak and fairly predictable. And the villain is directly aligned to, again, mirrors and echoes the first one and how their motivations and how supers are and how what they think the world should be. And it just feels lazy. It feels like a repetitive, unimaginative sequel. Sometimes sequels, upend the movie and say, okay, we're gonna take it further. We're gonna have more action, more, this and, and this feels like one of those sequels that's, we're gonna remake the first one and continue the first one too. And just like, I don't know. Try harder. I'm sorry. It seems very lazy. It seems uninspired, and it's very predictable. I saw everything coming a mile away, and it just didn't do anything for me. The comedy does work. It's well written. I'll give it that. It just feels not necessary. The pacing is an issue, where the movie can drag and become slow and boring at times. The plot is generic and cliche and simplistic at times too. So it's just a, same thing but not as good. They do add new superheroes to this mix and a new roster, but they do very little with them. They're just there for gags and or to advance the plot. They have no depth. The movie feels rushed and sloppy with many upon many plot holes and just things that don't make sense. Look, the movie doesn't have any real stakes too. The first one was about basically a world-ending thing, and this basically is, well, we'll get back to the status quo if he succeeds. So what? So what? I don't care. And they kept kind of mentioning there's a threat to the city, but I didn't really believe it. I'm not buying it. Ultimately, the plot feels meaningless. And when a plot feels meaningless, I just don't care. Look, the movie just fails to deliver a compelling narrative. Yeah, it's fun, it's entertaining, but it just feels like it just should be more. It just feels lazy, it feels basic, it feels, it doesn't dramatically enhance or advance the characters or scenario in any meaningful ways. It just kind of remake it and do it over again. And you can't do the same thing over and over again and expect the same thing to get better. It just doesn't feel fresh. It doesn't feel new. It just feels frivolous and forgettable. Honestly, I watched this 2 days ago. Forgot about half of it already. And just, meh. I liked it. It just lacks the charm, the magic, the originality of the predecessor. And because it literally is, the missing parts of the predecessor, it literally begins where the first one ends. It just seems a little strange that it doesn't feel on its own, and they don't really mention the things that happened in the first movie. It just kind of moves on, and it doesn't really feel like a sequel, but it doesn't feel like a good continuation of the story either. It's like maybe episode 2 instead of where episode 1 was before. It doesn't really feel like season 2. Yeah, the animation's better, but Look, all in all, it just nothing incredible about Incredibles 2. Sadly, this movie is not amazing. It's not spectacular or fantastic or super or even marvelous. It is mediocre. So, final verdict for Incredibles 2 will be a 6 out of 10. It disappoints me. I'm sad. I really hate to be so critical for a Pixar or Disney movie, but I just feel like it didn't live up to the hype. And I feel like they just didn't do anything with the premise. They could have done more, and it just seems like a very lazy, easy sequel. And they should have done better. It really feels like this is an unnecessary movie. Fun for what it is, but you'll forget about it in a week. So that's going to be it for this review. All right, so that's going to be it for this podcast.
We now have a Patreon, and the link is in the description. Thanks for watching.
And we are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. They don't put it everywhere. Just look for us, 3D or 2D. And of course, review us on iTunes. And if you want to write us a letter, our email address is email3dortwo d@gmail.com. So that's going to be it. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye. Hey, bye.
Bye, everyone.
All right, before this podcast ends, I want to give a thank you to my patrons. Right now, we have one patron, which is David from Spain, and I want to thank you for your financial support to help making this possible. If you want your name to be called out and your location, please become a patron on Patreon. Our link should be in the description, or just look for us, 3D or 2D, on Patreon, and you get plenty of benefits. So again, thank you, David from Spain, and I hope to have many more Patreon patrons with us soon. Thanks again, David. Bye.